Welcome to our deep dive on medical malpractice.
Oh, this will be good.
We've got a stack of articles and research here.
A lot to go through.
And knowing how much you love learning, we're going to try to uncover some surprising facts and figures about this complex issue.
Sounds good.
Ready to explore.
Absolutely. It's a topic that often sparks strong emotions.
For sure.
So we'll navigate the information carefully.
Okay.
Presenting a balanced view and highlighting what's most important.
Okay, so let's start with the basics.
Sure.
What exactly is medical malpractice? I mean, we hear the term thrown around,
Right.
but what does it actually mean in a legal sense?
So at its core, medical malpractice boils down to professional negligence by a healthcare provider.
Mm-hmm.
It occurs when a doctor, nurse, or other healthcare professional fails to meet the accepted standard of care.
Right.
And that failure directly causes harm to a patient.
So it's not just about things going wrong. Right. In a medical setting, it's about things going wrong because someone messed up.
And the sources we have here highlight some common areas where these errors occur.
Okay.
Misdiagnosis, for example, is a major one. It's actually the most common reason for malpractice lawsuits, a whopping 33%.
33%, according to one report.
That's a huge number.
Yeah.
You know, it makes you think twice about every diagnosis you receive.
Exactly.
What other types of errors are common?
Surgical errors are another frequent problem, accounting for about 29% of lawsuits.
Wow.
Complications arising from treatment or surgery are also a big factor.
Okay.
Even if there's no clear-cut error,
Right.
patients might sue if they believe their condition worsened
Oh, wow.
due to a provider's negligence.
That's a really tricky area, isn't it?
It is.
How do you determine if it's just an unfortunate outcome versus actual negligence?
It often boils down to whether the provider
deviated from the accepted standard of care.
Okay.
Essentially, would a reasonably competent healthcare professional in a similar situation have acted in the same way?
Mm-hmm.
Expert testimony and a thorough review of medical records are usually needed to make that determination.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the impact of all this. I mean, we're not just dealing with hypothetical situations here.
No.
These errors have real-world consequences.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The data shows that over 250,000 deaths each year in the U.S. are attributed to medical errors.
Wow.
That's more than car accidents.
That many.
It really makes you wonder, what systemic issues are at play here? Are hospitals chronically understaffed?
Right.
Is there a lack of standardized training?
Yeah.
We need to understand the why behind these numbers.
That's a staggering statistic. 250,000 deaths. It really puts the issue into perspective.
Absolutely.
It makes medical errors the third leading cause of death in the U.S.
Right behind heart disease and cancer.
And the financial impact of these errors is huge as well.
I bet.
Between 2009 and 2018, the average payout for a medical malpractice claim was about $309,908.
Wow.
That adds up to a staggering $38.5 billion paid out over that period.
Wow, those are some big numbers. And it's not just the patients who are affected by all of this.
Yeah.
Being sued for malpractice can take a toll on a physician's career.
Absolutely.
And mental state, too.
Imagine the pressure of knowing that nearly every physician faces at least one lawsuit by the time they reach 65.
99% of physicians.
Yeah. Seriously.
It's in the data.
That's almost everyone. It's no wonder doctors feel stressed about this.
Right. And it's not just the fear of being sued. It's the impact on the doctor-patient relationship.
Yeah, I was going to say.
One report said that 25% of physicians admitted they lost trust.
Really?
From patients after being sued.
Wow.
They started treating patients differently.
Yeah.
Which makes you wonder if that fear and distrust could impact patient care.
It would make sense if it did.
Yeah.
It must be hard to maintain a good rapport with patients if you're constantly worried about being sued.
Oh.
I mean, wouldn't you be a bit more cautious and maybe even hesitant?
It's certainly understandable. Over half of the doctors surveyed were surprised when they were sued.
Really?
And a large majority felt the lawsuits were unwarranted.
That's really interesting. It seems like there's a disconnect between how patients and doctors perceive these situations.
Right.
Patients might not always understand the complexities involved, and doctors may feel unjustly targeted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that disconnect can contribute to a breakdown of trust which is so crucial in healthcare.
Totally.
It becomes a bit of a vicious cycle.
We've talked a lot about the national picture, but are there any interesting state-specific trends?
Oh, yeah.
In medical malpractice cases?
There are some fascinating differences.
Oh, really? Like what?
For example, did you know that New York had the highest number of medical malpractice reports and the highest total payouts
Interesting.
between 2009 and 2018?
New York. That's interesting. Why do you think that is?
Well,
is it simply because New York has a larger population?
Population might be a factor.
Okay.
But it's also worth considering that New York hasn't implemented the same kind of tort reform that other states have.
Gotcha.
Some states like Texas have seen significant decreases in malpractice payouts per capita.
Oh, wow.
Since enacting reforms in 2003.
So tort reform appears to have a tangible impact.
It seems that way.
On the number of lawsuits and the amount of money paid out. But wouldn't limiting payouts also discourage genuine victims?
It's a good question.
From seeking justice? How do we balance protecting doctors and ensuring patients have legal recourse?
That's a really important question.
Yeah.
And it highlights the complexity of this issue.
For sure.
There's no easy answer.
Yeah.
It's also important to remember that these statistics, while insightful, may not capture the full picture.
Okay.
There's a chance that medical malpractice is underreported.
Yeah, that's true.
Especially when it comes to things like misdiagnosis.
That makes sense. Misdiagnosis and delayed diagnosis often go unnoticed until complications arise, making it harder to trace back to negligence.
Yeah.
This suggests that the problem might be even more widespread than the data indicates. It's a sobering thought.
It is, and it underscores the importance of vigilance and advocating for yourself in healthcare settings.
That's a good point.
But before we go down that road, let's shift gears and talk about the legal aspects of medical malpractice.
Sounds good.
What are the key elements that need to be proven?
Okay, let's unpack that. What does someone have to demonstrate to win a medical malpractice lawsuit?
So, to win a medical malpractice case, a patient, also known as the plaintiff, needs to prove 4 key elements. First, they have to establish that a duty of care existed between the healthcare provider and the patient. Basically, this means proving there was a doctor-patient relationship.
That seems pretty straightforward. What's the second element?
The second element is proving that the provider breached their duty of care. This means showing they didn't meet the accepted standard of care expected of a reasonably competent healthcare professional in a similar situation.
Yeah, so it's not enough to simply show that something went wrong. You have to prove that the provider's actions fell below the accepted standard.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Okay.
What about the third element?
The third element is causation. The patient has to demonstrate that the provider's breach of duty directly caused their injury. This can get tricky. Especially when dealing with pre-existing conditions. Or multiple contributing factors.
I can imagine that would be challenging to prove in some cases.
It is.
How do you isolate the specific action that caused the harm?
Exactly. It often requires expert testimony and a detailed analysis of medical records to establish that causal link. And finally, the fourth element is damages. The patient must prove that they suffered actual harm as a result of the provider's negligence. This can include things like medical expenses, lost wages, pain and suffering, and the cost of future medical care.
So there are a lot of hoops to jump through
to
win a medical malpractice case. It's clearly not a simple process.
No, it's not.
What role does legal representation play in all of this?
Having experienced legal representation is crucial for both patients and healthcare providers. A skilled attorney can help navigate the complexities of the legal system and ensure that the rights of all parties are protected.
It sounds like finding the right lawyer could make or break a case.
For sure.
We have some information here about a law firm that specializes in medical malpractice cases, Martin Law Firm. What can you tell us about them?
They seem to have a strong focus on complex medical malpractice cases and are known for their expertise and compassionate approach. They emphasize their thorough investigation process and commitment to personalized attention for their clients.
That's encouraging. They also highlight their commitment to holding negligent parties accountable.
Yeah.
And advocating for victims' rights, which I think is really important in this field.
They do. And they mention their track record of success in securing significant compensation for their clients.
Okay.
It sounds like they have a lot of experience navigating the complexities of medical malpractice law.
It's good to know that there are law firms out there specifically dedicated to helping people who have been victims of medical negligence.
For sure.
But let's shift our focus back to the healthcare providers for a moment.
Okay.
It's important to understand the pressures and challenges they face in this litigious environment.
For sure.
We have some insights from a survey of physicians that might shed some light on that.
Absolutely. It's crucial to consider both sides of this issue.
Yeah.
The Medscape survey we have here revealed that 58% of physicians who were sued were very surprised by the lawsuit.
Really?
And a whopping 89% believed the suit was unwarranted.
That's a really high percentage. It seems like there's a real disconnect between how patients and doctors perceive these situations.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if there's a communication breakdown happening somewhere along the line.
You're right.
Yeah.
And this disconnect can contribute to a climate of fear and distrust, which ultimately hurts everyone involved.
So what can healthcare providers do to protect themselves?
That's the question, isn't it?
In this environment, it seems like a bit of a no-win situation.
It can feel that way.
Uh-huh.
But there are definitely steps doctors can take to minimize their risk.
Like what? Give us some practical advice.
Clear communication with patients is paramount.
Yeah.
Taking the time to explain things thoroughly, answer questions patiently, and really listen to patient concerns can go a long way in preventing misunderstandings that could escalate into legal issues.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about building a rapport and establishing trust. What else can doctors do?
Thorough documentation is also key.
Okay.
Doctors should meticulously record everything in the patient's medical record, including factual statements of events, notes related to follow-up care, and a complete description of their interaction with the patient.
I'm guessing that means not just documenting what treatment was provided, but also the reasoning behind those decisions?
Exactly. Clear documentation can help demonstrate that the provider followed the accepted standard of care, even if there was an unexpected or negative outcome. It's also important to remember that medical records are legal documents.
So there's a legal aspect to those notes as well.
Yeah.
Is there anything doctors should avoid including in medical records?
They should avoid documenting personal opinions or subjective judgments. It's always best to stick to the facts and avoid using language that could be perceived as self-serving or defensive.
Good advice. It sounds like maintaining objective and factual medical records is crucial for risk management.
For sure.
But what about from the patient's perspective? If someone believes they've been a victim of medical malpractice, what steps should they take?
The first and most important step is to seek legal advice from a qualified medical malpractice attorney as soon as possible.
Why is it so important to act quickly?
There are a couple of reasons. First, most states have statutes of limitations for filing malpractice claims. If you miss the deadline, you could lose your right to sue.
So time is of the essence. What's the other reason?
Second, evidence can disappear or become less reliable over time. Memories fade. Witnesses become harder to locate. And medical records might get lost or destroyed.
It seems like acting promptly helps preserve the evidence and strengthens the case.
Precisely. And a good attorney will know how to gather the necessary evidence and build a strong case on the patient's behalf.
What kind of evidence is typically needed in a malpractice case?
It varies depending on the specific case. But generally speaking, medical records are crucial. The attorney will carefully review those records to look for any deviations from the standard of care.
It's amazing how much information those records contain. It's like a window into everything that happened during a patient's care.
They really are. They can paint a detailed picture of the patient's medical journey, the treatment provided, and the decisions made by the healthcare providers involved.
So they're essentially the foundation of any malpractice case. But are medical records the only type of evidence used?
They are often the starting point. In addition to medical records, the attorney might also gather evidence like expert witness testimony.
Okay.
They might also get witness statements from other healthcare professionals.
Right.
Or individuals who observed the care provided, and even photographs or videos.
Wow.
If they're relevant to the case.
Wow. So it's a pretty comprehensive process.
It is.
It sounds like the attorney is piecing together a puzzle.
Yeah.
To demonstrate what happened and who was at fault.
That's a great analogy. And the more pieces of the puzzle they can gather, the stronger the case becomes.
Okay, so we've covered the legal side of things, but let's talk about the bigger picture for a moment.
Okay.
This deep dive has given us a lot to think about.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We've covered so much ground, from those shocking statistics to the legal complexities and the ethical considerations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's clear that medical malpractice is a multifaceted issue with far-reaching implications for both patients and healthcare providers.
I think one of the most striking things we've learned is just how common medical errors are. The fact that they're the third leading cause of death in the U.S.
Wow.
is a stark reminder that even in a field dedicated to healing, mistakes can happen and with devastating consequences.
It's a sobering thought.
Yeah.
And it underscores the importance of patient safety initiatives and continuous efforts to improve healthcare quality.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we've also seen how these errors can have a ripple effect. Eroding trust between doctors and patients and creating a climate of fear and litigation. It seems like everyone loses in that scenario.
You're right. The fear of lawsuits can lead to defensive medicine, where doctors order unnecessary tests or procedures to protect themselves from liability, rather than focusing solely on what's best for the patient.
It's a shame because those extra tests and procedures add to the already high cost of healthcare.
They do. And they don't always benefit the patient.
Right.
It highlights the need for a more balanced approach.
Yeah.
One that prioritizes both patient safety and physician well-being.
So how do we move forward? What can we do to address this complex issue?
Well, for starters, open communication and transparency between doctors and patients is crucial. If patients feel heard and understood, they're less likely to resort to litigation.
That makes sense. It's about building a relationship of trust and mutual respect.
Yeah.
So patients feel comfortable raising concerns.
Exactly.
And doctors feel supported in their decision-making.
And on the provider side, robust risk management programs can help identify and address potential areas of vulnerability, reducing the likelihood of errors and lawsuits.
So it's about creating a culture of safety and accountability within healthcare institutions.
Precisely. And that involves investing in training. Implementing clear protocols and procedures. And fostering a culture where errors are viewed as opportunities for learning and improvement rather than something to be swept under the rug.
That's a really important point. It's about shifting the focus from blame to prevention. And creating a system where everyone feels empowered to speak up about safety concerns.
Absolutely. And it's about recognizing that patient safety is everyone's responsibility. From the doctors and nurses to the administrators and policymakers.
This has been an incredibly informative deep dive.
It has.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
But there's always more to explore.
Always.
Before we wrap up, I'd love to get your thoughts on something that's been on my mind throughout our conversations. We've talked about the human cost of medical errors, both for patients and providers. But what about the financial burden on the healthcare system as a whole? These lawsuits and settlements must add up to a significant expense.
You're right. The financial burden of medical malpractice extends far beyond individual patients and providers. The cost of litigation insurance premiums and defensive medicine practices adds billions of dollars to the overall cost of healthcare each year.
Wow, that's a huge amount of money. It makes you wonder if those resources could be better spent on improving patient safety and preventing errors in the first place. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a valid question. It highlights the need for a more systemic approach to addressing medical malpractice. We need to find ways to reduce the number of errors in the first place, foster better communication between doctors and patients, and create a more efficient and equitable system for resolving disputes when they do arise.
I agree. It's a conversation that needs to involve everyone, healthcare providers, patients, policymakers, and insurance companies. We all have a stake in creating a safer and more effective healthcare system.
For sure.
This deep dive has given me a lot to think about. It's clear that medical malpractice is a complex issue with no easy answers. But understanding the statistics, the legal landscape, and the human impact of these errors is a good starting point for finding solutions.
Absolutely. And it's a reminder that even in a field as advanced as medicine, human fallibility is a factor we can't ignore. Mistakes will happen, but how we respond to those mistakes, how we learn from them, and how we work to prevent them, that's what truly matters.
Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive, what are some key takeaways you hope our listener will walk away with? What are the big aha moments you want them to have?
First, I hope they gain a deeper understanding of what medical malpractice really is. It's not just about bad outcomes, but about a breach of the accepted standard of care that results in harm to a patient. There's a legal definition and process involved that goes beyond simply feeling like a doctor made a mistake.
That's a crucial distinction. It underscores the importance of having clear guidelines and protocols in place to ensure that healthcare providers are meeting those standards. It's not about pointing fingers, but about setting clear expectations for quality care.
Exactly. Secondly, I hope our listener takes away an appreciation for the scope of the problem. The statistics we discussed are pretty alarming, and they really underscore the need for ongoing efforts to improve patient safety and reduce the incidence of medical errors. This isn't a niche issue. It's something that affects a huge number of people.
Those numbers were definitely eye-opening. I think it's easy to assume that medical errors are rare, but the reality is that they're more common than we'd like to think. And the consequences can be devastating.
They can be. And finally, I hope our listener recognizes the importance of open communication and collaboration between patients and healthcare providers. It's about building a partnership based on trust and transparency.
That's a theme that's come up repeatedly throughout our conversation. It seems like trust and transparency are essential for creating a safer and more effective healthcare system.
They absolutely are. And it's a two-way street. Patients need to feel empowered to ask questions and advocate for themselves. And healthcare providers need to be open to feedback and willing to acknowledge when mistakes happen. That vulnerability can actually strengthen the doctor-patient relationship.
That's a powerful message. And it leads me to a final thought I'd like to leave our listener with. We've talked about the reactive measures like lawsuits and insurance that are in place to address medical malpractice after the fact. But what about preventative measures? What can we do as a society to create a healthcare system that minimizes the risk of errors in the first place?
That's a fantastic question. I think it starts with a cultural shift within the medical community. We need to move away from a culture of blame and towards a culture of learning and continuous improvement.
I love that idea. It's about creating a safe space where healthcare providers can openly discuss errors, share best practices, and work together to find solutions. Imagine if mistakes weren't seen as career-ending events, but as valuable opportunities for learning and growth.
Exactly. And it also involves investing in technology and systems that support patient safety. Things like electronic health records, medication reconciliation systems, and standardized protocols for high-risk procedures.
Those are great examples. And I think it's also important to remember that patient safety is everyone's responsibility. We as patients need to be informed and engaged in our own care. We need to ask questions, clarify instructions, and advocate for ourselves if we have concerns.
I completely agree. It's about being an active participant in your healthcare journey, not just a passive recipient.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener for me, and I hope it has been for our listener as well. It's a complex issue, but one that we can't afford to ignore. By understanding the challenges, fostering open communication, and working together to find solutions, we can create a healthcare system that is safer, more effective, and more compassionate for everyone.
Well said. And I encourage our listener to continue exploring this topic and to engage in thoughtful discussions about how we can all contribute to a better, safer healthcare system.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll catch you on our next deep dive into another fascinating topic. Until then, keep those brains curious.